This is Parent, Boss, Leader.
Parent, boss, leader.
And here's your host. She's a courageous voice for women, parents, and modern workforce leaders alike. She's a keynote speaker and proud mother of two, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at ATR International, Laura R. Munson.
Hello and welcome to the podcast, Parent, Boss, Leader. I am Laura Munson, your host. Interactive podcast where I interview leaders across industries about different topics. And today I am so excited to have Lexi Hernandez, RTX DE&I professional. Thanks for joining us today, Lexi.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about Lexi's passion in the DE&I space, her background, and really it's a great way to connect with diversity professionals. So those in the audience who like what you hear, please like and subscribe. So let's dive in, Lexi. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. So let's look at you in your career and your trajectory at RTX and DEI. Can you share with us some pivotal moments that really shaped your journey in that space and maybe even some challenges you faced as a woman?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll talk a little bit about those really pivotal moments. I was really fortunate very early in my career to have an incredible role model. So one of the first organizations that I worked for was a small entrepreneurial organization, and the CEO was a woman. And she was this quiet force. She had high emotional intelligence. She was business savvy. She was kind and empathetic, highly skilled in her craft. She was just an incredible leader and very authentic. And so as she was starting this company, it was still a fairly new organization. She was also raising two small children.
Wow.
And so, so seeing her in action, the way she presented herself, the way she influenced others, she stayed true to herself, and she was very inspiring. So, at that time, while I observed her behaviors and I knew she was the leader that I wanted to be like, I didn't realize until recently in my career just what a big impact she had on me. So I feel so fortunate that I was able to be exposed to a woman leader like her very early on. So that was incredible.
Wow. Love that. I remember even early in my career, similarly, one of my first managers in HR said, look around in the organization, look at a woman who you really admire and want to emulate in the future. And that was one of the best pieces of advice I ever received. I remember this powerhouse leader herself. She had young kids. She was hilarious. She had a way of being funny and professional. So I love you sharing that story too. A CEO and young kids. That sounds very, very intense.
Yeah. But and I'm sure she had her struggles, right? We all do. But just the way she presented herself in her authentic way was phenomenal. So I learned a lot from her. Now, in terms of challenges, I know many of us have faced challenges in our career. I think as a woman leader, a couple of things really stand out to me. First and foremost, being underestimated and having to work twice as hard. And there were these small examples that presented itself to me throughout my career where that felt more apparent. Early in my career, I had a male mentor who it took us some time to develop a relationship, but we had at the end, we built a really trusting relationship, and he ended up being one of my strongest advocates and mentors in my career. And he shared with me, once we had developed that trusting relationship, he had shared with me, he was on the interview panel, when I was first being hired into this particular role that was going to support his organization. He shared that he advocated not to hire me because he didn't feel as though, he felt as though I wasn't ready for the role. And he admitted that would have been a huge mistake. And so
Wow.
there's these moments, right, where I feel like I've been underestimated in terms of my skills and capabilities, where I've had to like push extra hard to prove myself, not
Mhm.
only to others around me, but also to myself,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, it's true. And, you and I've connected. Each time we talk, I think about what a powerhouse leader you are. You're inspiring to many women, and even your story is inspiring too, Lexi. For example, you're a powerhouse career woman in your own home. Your husband, he decided to be a stay-at-home dad. So you've really excelled in your career, and he really takes care of the home. Can you share a little bit about that for our listeners?
Yeah, happy to share. It's interesting. Societal gender norms, right, they become really apparent when you're trying to fight against them. Right, we know
Yes.
they're there. They kind of linger in
Yes.
the background, but when you're going against the grain and against the norm, they become even more apparent and really frustrating. So we had made, as a family unit, my husband and I made the decision when our first son was 2 years old, that he would stay home with our son and that I would continue working. And our oldest is now 10. So this has been multiple years in the making. Um, it was absolutely the right decision for us as a family. I am so thankful that we decided that together, but I'll be very real. It was hard. It was
Yeah.
hard for both of us. As a working mother, I had so much of my energy going towards work, and then when I was home, towards the kids and the household. And I still felt, as a mother, I carried a lot of the emotional weight for our family.
Yeah.
And as for my husband, he didn't have any support network. Yes, we
Uh,
had family, but there were no other stay-at-home dads that he could connect with and
yeah.
problem solve with, or just feel like he belonged.
Yeah.
And so he started to also not only get consumed, obviously, with the kids and their activities, but then also he didn't have something that he felt was his, that he could really be proud of. And
Yeah.
so we started to grow apart. Our
Mm.
relationship got tough for a while. And we both found solace in therapy. We recognized that we
Mm.
had to do some work on ourselves as individuals first, and
Mhm.
then we could work on our relationship. And I'll tell you, both of us, we are strong advocates for therapy. We want
Oh,
to
yes.
normalize
Yeah.
therapy. We tell our
Yes.
friends, our family, right? You go in for your physical health check with your doctor every so often. We need a
Mhm.
mental health check too. And
Yes.
so we talk about it a lot with our friends and support network, of just the how much it helped us. And I'll again be very transparent that the success that I've seen and been able to experience in my professional career, I fully contribute, of course, to my hard work, but also to my husband and his hard work and our partnership. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't be, where I am today if he wasn't also as successful at home as he's been.
Lexi, that is beautiful. I love how you shared that, and I love your transparency as well. I think it even creates an honest, open environment for people listening. I think it's fair to even go to one's employer and ask what type of programs are available. There's so many resources nowadays, and the stigma is not there anymore. We need therapy.
That's
Life's hard,
right. Yeah,
right?
that's right. You need your network, but you also need somebody. You need having therapy and that opportunity to just be able to share in a very real and candid way. It can make a huge difference.
Yes, I appreciate that, you sharing it. What I wanted to jump into next, it's one of my topics that I'm always thinking about. Mom guilt. It's a
Uh,
thing here. Mom guilt. Ugh, it's so relatable to so many of us, so many professional women who I talk to. We all experience it on so many different levels. I wanted to ask you if you could share your personal experience with it as a career focused woman and how you deal with that.
oh yeah. Mom guilt is real. It is very real, right? And it shows up in a variety of different ways. For me, it's largely shown itself as that feeling of when I'm spreading myself too thin, that I'm not good at any one thing, that, oh my gosh, I'm a horrible mom, I'm a horrible wife, I'm not a good leader, I'm not a good friend or sister, right? Just feel like I'm failing in every aspect of life. And it just kind of comes at all at one time. And so it really is about, first and foremost, recognizing when that's starting to surface and giving ourselves some grace in the process,
Yes.
right? We got to give ourselves
Yes.
more grace. I'll never forget, again, shortly after my first was born, I was going back to work as a nursing mom. And I was in the lactation room one afternoon and called my husband to check in to see how things were going. And our son was just crying and crying and
Oh,
crying in the background. And
oh,
he was having my husband was having the hardest time calming him down and like getting him down for a nap. And oh, my heart hurt. And I just was bawling.
yeah.
Crying in the lactation room. And the positive side of that is I hadn't produced that much milk in such a short amount of time. That wave of emotion. But
Wow.
right, it just comes. But then at the same time, I had an opportunity to go after that happened. I went and talked to a friend at work, right, and just kind of got the experience and the feeling off my out of my head, and spoke with somebody about it. And so I think that's a big thing, giving
Yeah.
ourselves grace, finding a
Yes.
good network that you
Yeah.
can go to, whether it's, friends outside of work, friends inside of work. I also think a lot about quality versus quantity with my kids, right? How do I make sure that when I am home and not traveling, I'm spending that time with them in a way that makes sense for them? And then I had an opportunity to hear Andrea Jung, who was a former CEO of Avon. So when she was in that role, I heard her speak at a conference. And she shared that, balance is possible, but not likely all on the same day.
Yeah.
So we got to make trade-offs, right? Some days we work those long hours, and the next day, maybe you head out of the workplace a little early to go to a soccer game with your kids. So making those trade-offs, I think, is really key to feel that better sense of balance in your life.
Thank you. Well communicated, Lexi. I think people hearing it's important to give ourselves grace as moms. Sure, dads have dad guilt too, who are working, who aren't there, but the grace and not believing the lies. Like it's a lie. I'm not a good mom. I'm not a good wife. I'm not a good worker. I'm not a good leader. It's lies at the end of the day. And at the end of the line, kids remember how loved they were.
Yeah.
So, like you shared, it's the quality time. It's making those moments impactful, and it's the long haul, not the short day here and there. So, thank you for that reminder. Now, speaking of moms, too, we had a really good conversation. We had breakfast about 2 months back in Arizona. It was wonderful. And one part of our conversation that I thought was really interesting is the current system that we have in the corporate world is really tailored a lot towards non-moms or non-parents for that matter. Can you share maybe instances or observations where you've really felt this disparity?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I feel fortunate that I have a platform in the workplace to talk about these kinds of scenarios. So in my role in diversity, equity, and inclusion, I often talk about equity from the standpoint of design. So when we think about an organizational setting or a product, a process, a practice within an organization, they're often built to accommodate the majority. And we know, just from a pure number standpoint, most Fortune 500 companies are either led by or have the majority of their representation are able-bodied, cisgender, white males. And so for pure efficiency standpoint, right, when practices are designed, they're designed with that majority in mind. You kind of think of a bell curve, right? But then you have these outliers, working parents, moms in the workplace, women leaders who are now, really coming into their own within organizational settings, and we have to adjust and make those nuanced trade-offs again, from an organizational standpoint. but thinking about, how do we design things that expand the bell curve and allow more equitable access for all individuals to thrive and succeed? That is one of the
Yeah.
things that we are hyper focused in on from a diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoint. So,
Hmm.
just to give an example, we'll talk about benefits. Kind of
Yeah.
the table stakes, the baseline for working parents, working mothers, parental leave benefits, access to lactation rooms, flexible work arrangements. Those are all benefits that most companies tend to offer these days. But the question is, what's the culture? Does the culture allow working parents to truly take hold of and access these benefits without fear that they won't have equitable access to career making opportunities? That's the key. Having
Yeah.
the benefits in place is just the start. You also have to ensure that your culture is one that enables individuals to really take advantage of those benefits.
Absolutely. So you mentioned having a platform, and at RTX, clearly diversity is celebrated. Even having you in your role, it says something. So, can you share a little bit with our listeners about maybe even day-to-day practicals about how you champion diversity within the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share. And you're right. As an RTX organization, not just by the showing of roles like mine, but truly by the leadership buy-in and support and allyship that we have for diversity, equity, inclusion, we really place it as a business priority. And that is key. There
Mhm.
is a ton of great research that points to the increase in organizational profitability, innovation, when you have diverse and balanced teams. And when I'm talking about diversity, I truly do mean all the different ways by which we are different as individuals. Right? So oftentimes we may think about more of the apparent demographic data, such as gender, race, and ethnicity. But diversity also means age and tenure with the company, educational background, gender identity and expression, able-bodied, disabled, right? There's a wide spectrum of ways by which we as individuals show up to the workplace and are different. So having diversity on teams is really key to drive innovation and profitability. However, diversity alone is not enough. It's not enough just to hire a bunch of women and expect your profits to soar. You also need inclusion.
Mhm.
Inclusion is key to really harness the power of diversity. And I talked
Yeah.
about it a little bit before in terms of ensuring that individuals feel valued. But
Mhm.
truly, do you have a workplace environment where every single person feels as though their perspective is not only heard, but it's really seen for what it is?
Mhm.
It's valued, it's protected. That's really key. And
Yeah.
so from a DEI perspective, we look at those opportunities to ensure that inclusion is really thriving, both from a large scale kind of systemic perspective and
Mhm.
also in the day-to-day experiences of employees.
Yeah, I think very well said. To sort of, I guess, one of my final questions to go along with what you're just sharing is there's a lot of women and mothers, maybe even dads, who are listening to this podcast right now, and they're navigating similar challenges in the leadership journey, balancing being parents at home, the guilt, or being in an organization that's not structured for parents. What advice or strategies would you offer in helping these people balance and advocate for the changes that they want to see in their own work environments?
Yeah, happy to discuss that further. I think first and foremost, and one thing that I've learned over time is to find the power in your authenticity. As we talked about before, many organizations, may not have been built with certain individuals in mind, but there is power in your authenticity. Don't feel like you have to put on a facade to fit in. Really find that element of who you are, your strengths, and harness that. Explore your identity and how it shapes your experiences. Identify your strengths and find those opportunities to really leverage them within the workplace. And if you feel like you're not getting there, seek out a mentor, seek out a sponsor, build your network. Relationships in organizations are so key. We need those individuals that we can leverage as sounding boards to bounce ideas off of, but then also really making sure that we have leaders and others in the organization who are willing to advocate on our behalf. So, but that takes time and effort to build that network, to build those relationships, to really position yourself in a way that others will advocate. But part of, that comes from your authenticity. So I think that's really key. And last, but definitely not least, remember you are enough. That bringing your authentic self into the organization, again, can be really powerful. And we have to believe that who we are and what we bring to the table is enough.
Beautiful, Lexi. Well said. And don't be afraid, right? I think a lot of us can kind of shrink back from expressing our needs and think that we'll be ostracized or judged, but it's not being afraid to advocate, not being afraid to speak up. Because I even thought the other day how accommodating my own CEO is at ATR International. I was thinking, oh gosh, my kids are off from school this week. They're being babysat by the TV. I wanted to take off Wednesday. We have so many moving pieces. So I kind of shared my struggle with her, and she said, please take the day off on Wednesday. Goodbye. I've got this for you. And it really reminded me that sometimes when we're open about our struggle, people are there to support us. So for our listeners to hear that, just speaking up, that's how we're creating change, right, Lexi?
That's absolutely right. And sometimes it is just about sharing, what you are going through with one of your leaders. And sometimes we have to then also deal with that, what those false narratives that we put on ourselves also of what what it means to be a strong leader. It doesn't mean that you got to put in 90 hours every week, right? It is again about that balance and that trade-off. I love how you positioned it.
Excellent. Lexi, thank you so much for popping on the podcast today. It really was a pleasure having you. I think your voice in this conversation is majorly invaluable. And I know on behalf of RTX, you're leading well. And also, I've met you because you were speaking on a panel, like you are across the United States sharing your voice. So, really, the work that you're doing is incredible. And I applaud you. If it resonated today, listeners who hear this, please like and subscribe to Parent Boss Leader, leave us a review. And then in the meantime, Lexi, what's the best way if people want to learn more about you? Find you on LinkedIn?
Find me on LinkedIn. So my full name is Alexandria, but you can find me on LinkedIn as Lexi.Hernandez, and definitely interested in connecting.
Perfect. Thank you again, Lexi. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.